The Anchor's Rest wasn't the kind of place where trouble usually found Marcus Thompson. The Weather Dive Bar sat 3 blocks from the naval base, its neon sign flickering against the evening darkness like a dying lighthouse. Most nights, it served as a quiet refuge for off-duty sailors and local workers who wanted nothing more than a cold beer and peace. Marcus pushed through the heavy wooden door, his civilian clothes doing little to hide the military bearing that came from 12 years as a Navy SEAL. At 34, he carried himself with the confident ease of someone who had faced death in 17 different countries and lived to tell about it. His team called him steady for good reason. Nothing seemed to rattle Marcus Thompson. The bar was moderately busy for a Thursday night. A handful of sailors occupied corner booths, their voices mixing with the low hum of an old jukebox playing classic rock. Behind the bar, Jimmy Martinez polished glasses with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing the job for 20 years. He nodded at Marcus with the familiarity of a regular customer. "The usual?" Jimmy asked, already reaching for a bottle of local craft beer. "Make it 2," Marcus replied, settling onto a bar stool. Meeting someone. As if on cue, the door opened again, and Lieutenant Sarah Chin walked in. At 28, Sarah was one of the newer additions to the base's intelligence division, but her reputation for thoroughness and sharp analysis had already earned her respect among the senior staff. She spotted Marcus immediately and made her way over, her professional demeanor softening into a genuine smile. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding onto the adjacent stool. Admiral Richardson kept the briefing running longer than expected. "No problem," Marcus replied, sliding the second beer in her direction. "How did the presentation go?" Sarah's face lit up with satisfaction. "Better than I hoped. They approved the new surveillance protocol for the overseas operations. 6 months of work finally, paying off." They settled into comfortable conversation about base politics and upcoming deployments. Sarah was easy to talk to, intelligent without being pretentious, confident without arrogance. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying her company, something that had become increasingly rare in recent months. The pleasant evening took a turn when 3 men entered the bar. They were clearly military, their haircuts and posture gave them away despite their civilian clothes, but Marcus didn't recognize them. Probably stationed at one of the other nearby installations. They claimed a table near the back, their voices already loud with the confidence that came from several drinks at their previous location. The leader of the group was a tall, broad-shouldered man with the kind of swagger that suggested he was used to being the center of attention. His name tag at whatever unit he served with probably read Williams based on how his companions addressed him. He had the look of someone who had seen some action, but hadn't quite earned the humility that usually came with real combat experience. Marcus might not have paid them much attention if Williams hadn't started scanning the room with the predatory interest of someone looking for entertainment. His gaze settled on Sarah, and Marcus felt his shoulders tense slightly. "Check out the Ice Queen at the bar," Williams said to his companions, his voice carrying further than he probably intended. "Looks like she's got a stick so far up her back, she could be a flagpole." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she continued her conversation with Marcus as if she hadn't heard. Years of military service had taught her to choose her battles carefully. Williams wasn't content to let it go. He stood up from his table, beer in hand, and sauntered over to the bar with the exaggerated confidence of someone who had consumed just enough alcohol to make bad decisions seem reasonable. "Evening, folks," he said, positioning himself between Marcus and Sarah in a way that was clearly intended to be intimidating. "Mind if I join the conversation?" "Actually, we do," Sarah replied calmly, not bothering to look in his direction. "We were having a private discussion." Williams laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Private discussion? In a public bar? That's rich, sweetheart. What are you two talking about anyway?" "Comparing notes on military regulations." Marcus felt his hand tighten around his beer bottle, but Sarah shot him a quick look that said she could handle this herself. He respected that Sarah was a commissioned officer and perfectly capable of dealing with drunk idiots. "Listen, friend," Williams continued, apparently mistaking Sarah's silence for weakness. "I've been watching you two, And I gotta say, you look like you could use some real company. Not this Boy Scout routine you've got going with G.I. Joe here. Sarah finally turned to face Williams directly, her expression perfectly controlled. I appreciate the offer, but I'm exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with. Perhaps you should return to your table. Oh, come on now, Williams said, moving closer. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to show you a good time. You look like you haven't had fun since the Clinton administration. The insult was crude and juvenile, but Marcus saw how it landed. Sarah's face remained composed, but there was a flash of hurt in her eyes that she quickly suppressed. She had worked twice as hard as most of her male colleagues to earn respect in a male-dominated field, and comments like Williams were a constant reminder of the uphill battle she faced. Marcus set his beer down with deliberate care and turned to face Williams fully. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made smart people pay attention. I think the lady made herself clear, he said. Maybe it's time you headed back to your friends. Williams looked Marcus up and down, apparently trying to decide if he was worth the trouble. Marcus was clearly in good shape, but he wasn't particularly large or obviously intimidating. Williams apparently decided he could handle whatever this civilian might throw at him. And maybe it's time you minded your own business, pal, Williams shot back. I'm just having a friendly conversation with the lady here. No need for you to get your panties in a twist. Marcus stood up slowly, his movement fluid and controlled. He was several inches shorter than Williams, but something in his posture made the larger man take an involuntary step backward. Here's the thing, Marcus said, his voice remaining conversational. The lady asked you politely to leave her alone. You ignored that request. That tells me you're either deaf, stupid, or just don't care about other people's boundaries. Which one is it? William's face flushed red, whether from embarrassment, alcohol, or anger was unclear. Who the hell do you think you are, talking to me like that? Just someone who thinks people should treat each other with basic respect, Marcus replied. Novel concept, I know. By now, the entire bar had gone quiet, sensing the tension. Jimmy had stopped wiping glasses and was watching the interaction carefully, probably calculating whether he needed to call for backup or if these two grown men could resolve their differences without destroying his establishment. Williams looked around the room, suddenly aware that he had become the center of attention. His friends at the back table were watching nervously, probably wondering if they should intervene or distance themselves from whatever was about to happen. You know what, pal? Williams said, his voice getting louder. I don't think you understand who you're messing with. I'm Staff Sergeant Derek Williams, 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. I've done 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. I've earned the right to talk to whoever I want, however I want. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this information carefully. That's impressive, Sergeant Williams. Thank you for your service. Now, about treating people with respect. Screw your respect, Williams interrupted. And screw both of you. Ice Queen here probably hasn't seen any real action anyway. Probably some desk jockey playing soldier. That was the line Sarah wouldn't let him cross. She stood up, her 5'6" frame somehow seeming much larger as she faced down the belligerent Marine. Staff Sergeant Williams, she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. Lieutenant Sarek Chun, Naval Intelligence. I've been deployed to 12 countries in the past 6 years, including 18 months in active combat zones. I've earned my rank through merit, not through making crude comments to strangers in bars. Williams blinked, clearly not having expected this level of pushback. Lieutenant, you're an officer? That's correct, Sarah replied. And you just spent the last 10 minutes disrespecting a superior officer. I'm sure your commanding officer would be very interested to hear about your conduct tonight. For the first time since the confrontation began, Williams looked genuinely worried. Disrespecting an officer, especially one from another service branch, was the kind of career-ending mistake that could result in serious disciplinary action. Look, I didn't know you were an officer, he started to backtrack. I was just having some fun. No harm meant. The harm was in your intent, Sergeant, Sarah replied coldly. Your rank doesn't give you the right to harass civilians or fellow service members. Marcus watched the exchange with professional interest. Sarah was handling herself perfectly, using her authority and William's own military protocol against him. It was an elegant solution that would probably end the confrontation without any physical altercation. Unfortunately, Williams was apparently too drunk and too proud to accept the graceful exit he was being offered. "You know what?" he said, his voice getting ugly again. "I don't care what rank you think you have. You're still just another uptight broad who thinks she's better than everyone else. And your boyfriend here is still just some civilian who needs to learn to mind his own business." With that, Williams made his first and last mistake of the evening. He reached out to grab Sarah's arm, apparently intending to force her attention back to him. Marcus moved. The motion was so fast and fluid that most people in the bar missed the details. One moment Williams was reaching for Sarah's arm. The next moment he was bent over the bar, his own arm twisted behind his back in a position that would become extremely painful if he tried to struggle. "Now here's where things get interesting, Sergeant Williams," Marcus said conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather instead of immobilizing a man 30 pounds heavier than himself. "You just committed assault on a commissioned officer. That's a court-martial offense. The question is whether we handle this the easy way or the hard way." Williams tried to struggle free, but found that any movement sent shooting pain up his trapped arm. "Let me go, you crazy son of—" "The easy way," Marcus continued, ignoring the profanity, "is you apologize to Lieutenant Shun, return to your table, finish your beer quietly, and leave. The hard way involves military police, incident reports, and a very uncomfortable conversation with your commanding officer." Sarah watched the exchange with professional interest. Marcus had immobilized Williams without apparent effort, and was now offering him a way out that preserved everyone's dignity. It was a masterful display of controlled force. "What's it going to be, Sergeant?" Marcus asked. Williams was clearly in pain, but he was also drunk and embarrassed, which made him stupid. "I don't know who you think you are, but you just assaulted a United States Marine. You're going to jail." Marcus sighed, the sound genuinely disappointed. "Wrong answer." He applied just enough additional pressure to make Williams gasp, then released him entirely and stepped back. Williams straightened up, rubbing his shoulder and looking around the bar for support that wasn't coming. "Here's what's going to happen now," Marcus said calmly. "Lieutenant Shun is going to use her authority as an officer to file a formal complaint about your conduct. I'm going to provide a witness statement. Jimmy here probably has security cameras that recorded this entire interaction. Your commanding officer is going to receive a detailed report about how one of his Marines harassed a fellow service member and then tried to assault her." Williams looked around desperately. His friends at the back table had apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor and were quietly settling their tab. Jimmy was indeed pointing at a small camera mounted above the bar. "Or," Marcus continued, "you can apologize to the lieutenant, buy her a drink to replace the one that got warm during your interruption, and walk away. Your choice." For a moment, Williams looked like he might choose to escalate further. His pride was clearly warring with his survival instincts. Finally, self-preservation won. "I apologize, Lieutenant," he mumbled, not quite meeting Sarah's eyes. "I was out of line." Sarah nodded curtly. "Apology accepted, Sergeant. I suggest you remember this conversation the next time you consider approaching fellow service members inappropriately." Williams pulled out a $20 bill and placed it on the bar, then turned and walked toward the exit without another word. His friends followed quickly, leaving their half-finished beers behind. The tension in the room evaporated immediately. Conversations resumed, the jukebox seemed louder, and Jimmy went back to polishing glasses with a small smile on his face. Marcus settled back onto his bar stool as if nothing had happened. Sarah remained standing for a moment, processing what had just occurred. "That was very smoothly done," she said finally, retaking her seat. "Basic conflict resolution," Marcus replied, taking a sip of his beer. "Most people would rather back down than face real consequences for their actions." "Most people don't know how to apply a joint lock like that," Sarah observed. "That wasn't basic anything." Marcus smiled slightly. "Maybe not so basic." Sarah studied him with new interest. The way he had moved, the calm control he had maintained throughout the confrontation, the easy authority in his voice. None of that came from casual self-defense classes. "So what do you do when you're not rescuing intelligence officers from drunk Marines?" she asked. "This and that," Marcus replied vaguely. "Mostly just try to mind my own business." Sarah laughed. "Well, I'm glad you made an exception tonight. Though I should mention, I could have handled Sergeant Williams myself." "I never doubted it," Marcus said sincerely. "But sometimes it's nice to have backup." They resumed their conversation, but now there was a different energy between them. Sarah found herself curious about this man who could defuse a potentially violent situation with such apparent ease. Marcus was intrigued by an officer who could face down a hostile Marine without flinching. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the parking lot outside, or the phone call being made to someone who would be very interested to learn that Marcus Thompson had surfaced again after 6 months of carefully maintained anonymity. The evening was far from over. 3 hours later, Marcus walked Sarah to her car in the parking lot behind the Anchor's Rest. The evening had evolved from a simple drink between colleagues into something that felt like the beginning of a genuine friendship, possibly more. Their conversation had ranged from military experiences to books to travel, revealing surprising common ground between the intelligence officer and the mysterious civilian. "Thank you for tonight," Sarah said as they reached her Honda Accord. "Not just for the thing with Williams, but for the conversation. It's been a while since I've talked to someone who actually listens." "The pleasure was mine," Marcus replied. "Maybe we could do this again sometime when drunk Marines aren't providing entertainment." Sarah smiled. "I'd like that. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what you do for work. You're clearly military or former military, but you're being awfully vague about details." Marcus hesitated. The honest answer was complicated, involving classifications and operational security that he couldn't discuss with anyone lacking the appropriate clearances. The simple answer was that he was between assignments, which was technically true even if it didn't capture the complexity of his situation. "Former military," he said finally, taking some time to figure out what comes next. Sarah sensed there was more to the story, but she also recognized the careful non-answer of someone with security clearances. She'd given similar responses herself when civilians asked about her work. "Well, when you figure it out, I hope you'll still have time for drinks with new friends," she said, unlocking her car. "Count on it," Marcus replied. Sarah drove away, leaving Marcus alone in the parking lot. He waited until her taillights disappeared around the corner before walking to his own vehicle, a nondescript Ford pickup truck parked under a broken streetlight. Force of habit made him scan the area for potential threats before approaching the vehicle. That habit saved his life. The man waiting beside his truck was good, better than the average assassin Marcus had encountered in his career. He positioned himself in the shadows between two dumpsters, using the darkness to mask his presence until Marcus was within striking distance. If Marcus had been a normal civilian, or even a normally alert former soldier, the attack would have been successful. But Marcus Thompson was neither normal nor former. He was temporarily detached from active duty, but his instincts and training remained sharp as surgical steel. The attacker moved when Marcus was 15 feet away, coming out of the shadows with a knife held in a reverse grip that indicated professional training. His approach was silent and efficient, designed to end the fight before Marcus knew it had begun. Marcus pivoted on his left foot, using the momentum of his walking stride to power a spinning heel kick that caught the attacker in the solar plexus. The man doubled over, gasping, and Marcus followed up with a precise strike to the back of his neck that dropped him unconscious to the asphalt. The entire encounter lasted less than 4 seconds. Marcus knelt beside the fallen man, checking for additional weapons while examining his appearance and equipment. The attacker was Caucasian, approximately 30 years old, in excellent physical condition. His clothing was civilian, but expensive, not the kind of outfit worn by common street criminals. The knife was high-quality steel with a specialized grip design that suggested military or intelligence training. More importantly, the man's positioning and timing indicated he had been watching Marcus specifically, waiting for him to return his vehicle. This wasn't a random mugging or crime of opportunity. Someone had sent a professional to eliminate Marcus Thompson. Marcus retrieved the man's wallet and phone, quickly photographing the contents before replacing them. The identification claimed the man's name was David Morrison, with an address in Norfolk, Virginia. The address would almost certainly be false, but the identification itself might provide useful intelligence about who had manufactured it. The phone was more interesting. Recent calls included several to numbers with overseas area codes, and the text messages contained what appeared to be coded references to Marcus's location and routine. Someone had been tracking him for days, possibly weeks. Marcus zip-tied the unconscious man's hands behind his back using restraint from his truck's emergency kit, then dragged him behind the dumpsters where he wouldn't be immediately visible. The man would wake up in 20 or 30 minutes with a severe headache and no memory of exactly what had happened to him. By then, Marcus would be long gone. He drove through the city for 45 minutes, taking a deliberately circuitous route while checking for surveillance. No one appeared to be following him, but professional watchers would be difficult to detect without more sophisticated counter-surveillance equipment than he currently possessed. Marcus's apartment was a modest two-bedroom unit in a complex populated mostly by young professionals and military families. He'd chosen it specifically for its anonymity. Nothing about the building or his unit would attract attention from neighbors or casual observers. The lease was under one of several false identities he maintained for situations exactly like this one. Inside the apartment, Marcus activated security measures that would have surprised anyone who assumed he was just another retired soldier living on a modest pension. Motion sensors covered all approaches to the building. Infrared cameras monitored the parking lot, and electronic countermeasures would detect any attempts at surveillance or eavesdropping. The equipment represented technology that was theoretically available to civilian security companies, but in practice was only accessible to intelligence agencies and special operations units with unlimited budgets. Marcus poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and settled into his kitchen chair to think through the implications of the evening's events. Someone knowing his real identity and current location was problematic, but not necessarily catastrophic. His cover identity was solid enough to withstand casual investigation, and his operational security had been designed to handle exactly this kind of compromise. What worried him was the timing. The attack had occurred hours after his confrontation with Staff Sergeant Williams, but it was unlikely that Williams himself had arranged for professional assassins. The man was drunk, belligerent, and stupid, but he wasn't connected to the kind of networks that could deploy trained killers on short notice. That suggested someone else had been watching the bar tonight, observing Marcus's interaction with Sarah and Williams. The question was whether they were interested in Marcus specifically, or if Sarah had somehow become a target by association. Marcus pulled out a secure satellite phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 6 months. The voice that answered was crisp, professional, and unmistakably awake despite the late hour. "Operations. This is Ghost 9, Marcus said. "I need to speak with Control." "Stand by, Ghost 9. You're being transferred." A moment later, a different voice came on the line. This one was older, weathered by years of making decisions that cost lives and saved nations. Commander James Harrison had been Marcus's handler for 8 years, managing his assignments and providing operational support for missions that officially didn't exist. "Ghost 9, Harrison said. "I was wondering when you'd call. We've been monitoring some chatter that suggests your location may have been compromised." "Confirmed," Marcus replied. "Professional hitter made a play in the parking lot of a local bar 2 hours ago. He's neutralized but not eliminated. Someone's been tracking me. Any idea how they made you?" Marcus considered the question. His cover identity was nearly perfect, supported by years of carefully constructed history and documentation. Breaking it would require either exceptional luck or access to classified databases that few organizations possessed. "Negative," he said finally, "but the timing suggests they may have been conducting general surveillance rather than targeted surveillance. I had an interaction with local military personnel earlier tonight. If they were already watching military hangouts, They might have spotted me by chance. Describe the interaction. Marcus provided a concise summary of the confrontation with Staff Sergeant Williams, omitting personal details about Sarah, but including her rank and position. Harrison listened without interruption, asking clarifying questions only when necessary. "Lieutenant Chun is clean," Harrison said when Marcus finished. "We ran a background check on her last year when she applied for enhanced clearance. No red flags, no unusual associations. If someone was watching her specifically, it's related to her current assignment, not her personal life." "What's her current assignment?" "Classified above your current clearance level," Harrison replied. "But I can tell you it involves analysis of foreign military communications intercepts. Nothing that should attract hostile attention from professional assassins." Marcus absorbed this information. If Sarah's work involved intercepting foreign communications, she might have discovered something that certain parties preferred to keep secret. Intelligence officers who got too close to sensitive information sometimes found themselves targeted for elimination. "I think my cover is blown," Marcus said. "I need extraction and reassignment." Negative, Ghost 9. Your current assignment is open-ended observation and readiness. No active operations, no scheduled extraction. You're exactly where we need you to be. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the apartment's air conditioning. "Sir, if my location is compromised, I'm a liability to operational security. Standard protocol calls for immediate extraction." "Standard protocol has been modified for your situation," Harrison replied. "Your presence in that location is specifically required for an operation that's still developing. Extraction is not authorized." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at the phone in his hand. In 8 years of operations, Harrison had never refused an extraction request from a compromised asset. The fact that he was doing so now suggested that Marcus was involved in something much larger and more complex than his original briefing had indicated. Marcus walked to his bedroom closet and moved aside several hanging shirts to reveal a small safe built into the wall. Inside were documents, cash, weapons, and communication equipment that represented his true identity and purpose. Among them was a sealed envelope marked Emergency Instructions, open only under direct threat. He'd been given the envelope 6 months ago when he'd first arrived at his current assignment, with strict orders not to open it unless his life was in immediate danger. Tonight's attack certainly qualified as immediate danger, but his conversation with Harrison suggested that opening the envelope might reveal information that would change everything about his mission. Marcus replaced the envelope without opening it and closed the safe. Whatever game he was playing, the rules had apparently changed without anyone bothering to inform him. Until he understood the new rules, his best option was to continue playing his current role while staying alive long enough to figure out what was really happening. He spent the next 2 hours reviewing his security measures and preparing contingency plans for various scenarios. If more attackers came, he would be ready. If he needed to disappear quickly, he had routes and resources available. If the situation escalated beyond his ability to handle alone, he had emergency contacts who could provide additional support. What he didn't have was any clear understanding of why someone wanted him dead, or why his own chain of command seemed more interested in keeping him in place than keeping him safe. At 3 in the morning, Marcus's secure phone buzzed with an incoming text message from an unknown number. The message contained only 6 words, but they sent ice through his veins. "Lieutenant Chun is in danger. Trust no one." The message deleted itself automatically after 30 seconds, leaving no trace of its existence. But Marcus had memorized every word, and he spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, wondering how a simple drink with an intelligence officer had suddenly become a matter of life and death for both of them. Marcus arrived at the naval base at 0700 hours, 45 minutes before Sarah's usual arrival time. He'd spent the early morning hours researching her routine through careful observation of personnel movement patterns around the intelligence building. The base's security was solid, but predictable, designed more to keep unauthorized personnel out than to protect against sophisticated surveillance. His visitor credentials were legitimate, obtained through a cover story about consulting work for the base's logistics department. The documentation was thorough enough to withstand casual scrutiny, backed by computer records that would show a 6-month history of periodic visits for equipment assessments. Marcus positioned himself in the parking lot with clear sight lines to both the intelligence building and the main entrance. If someone was planning to move against Sarah, they would most likely do it during her commute to or from work, when she was predictable and isolated from immediate backup. At 0743 hours, Sarah's Honda Accord turned into the parking lot. Marcus watched her park in her assigned space, gather her briefcase and coffee cup, and begin walking toward the building entrance. She moved with the same confident stride he'd observed at the bar, but Marcus noticed details that most people would miss. Sarah was conducting basic situational awareness sweeps, her eyes moving in patterns that suggested training in personal security. She varied her pace slightly, creating opportunities to observe anyone who might be matching her movement. Most importantly, she carried herself with the alertness of someone who knew she might be in danger. Someone had warned her. Marcus waited until Sarah disappeared into the building, then spent another 30 minutes observing the area for any signs of hostile surveillance. He identified 2 possible watchers: a maintenance worker who spent too much time looking toward the intelligence building, and a woman in a parked sedan who had been reading the same newspaper page for 20 minutes. Neither appeared to pose an immediate threat, but their presence confirmed that Sarah had indeed become a target of interest for unknown parties. Marcus drove to a coffee shop 6 blocks from the base and used a secure tablet to access databases that officially didn't exist. His clearance level provided access to personnel records, assignment histories, and operational summaries for anyone with a security clearance below top secret. Sarah's file painted the picture of an exemplary officer whose career trajectory suggested she was destined for senior leadership positions. Her current assignment was listed simply as communications analysis, regional focus, which could mean anything from monitoring terrorist chatter to intercepting diplomatic cables. More interesting were the recent additions to her access logs. In the past 30 days, Sarah had been granted temporary clearance for materials related to something called Operation Neptune's Trident. The operation files themselves were classified above Marcus's current access level, but the peripheral information suggested it involved naval intelligence cooperation with foreign allies. Marcus cross-referenced the operation name with his own mission files and found no connections. Whatever Neptune's Trident involved, it wasn't directly related to his assignment to maintain cover and await further orders. But the timing was suspicious. The anonymous warning about Sarah's danger had arrived less than 12 hours after she'd mentioned Admiral Richardson's approval of her surveillance protocol. If her new work involved expanding intelligence collection capabilities, she might have uncovered information that certain parties preferred to remain hidden. Marcus's secure tablet chimed softly with an incoming encrypted message. The sender was identified only as Delta 7, a designation he didn't recognize from any of his previous operations. Ghost 9, your situation has become more complex. Lieutenant Chin's work has intersected with ongoing counterintelligence operation. Both of your safety depends on coordinated response. Meet at coordinates provided. Come alone. Trust verification code. Blackwater Sunrise. Marcus stared at the message for several minutes before it automatically deleted itself. The verification code was legitimate, a phrase known only to personnel with access to the most classified special operations databases. Someone with very high clearance was attempting to make contact. The provided coordinates led to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, 15 minutes from his current location. Every instinct Marcus possessed warned him that this could be a trap. Meeting unknown contacts at isolated locations was exactly the kind of mistake that ended careers and lives. But the alternative was leaving Sarah exposed to threats he didn't fully understand, and that wasn't acceptable. Marcus drove to the warehouse, taking a circuitous route that allowed him to verify he wasn't being followed. The building was exactly what he'd expected: old brick construction in a row of similar structures, most of which appeared abandoned or minimally used. Perfect for a clandestine meeting, or for disposing of someone who'd become inconvenient. He parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using abandoned buildings and industrial equipment for concealment. The warehouse appeared empty, but Marcus spotted signs of recent activity: tire tracks in the gravel, footprints leading to a side entrance, and the absence of dust on certain door handles. Marcus circled the building twice, identifying potential escape routes and defensive positions before finally approaching the designated entrance. The door was unlocked, opening into a cavernous space filled with abandoned machinery and stacks of wooden crates. A woman's voice echoed from the shadows near the back of the warehouse. "Ghost 9, please approach slowly, hands visible." Marcus complied, walking toward the voice with his hands held away from his body. As his eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, he could make out a figure standing behind a concrete pillar approximately 50 feet away. "That's close enough," the voice said. "I'm Commander Patricia Walsh, Naval Intelligence. I apologize for the dramatic meeting location, but recent events have made standard communication channels unreliable." Marcus studied what he could see of the woman. Mid-40s, professional bearing, confident voice with no trace of nervousness despite the unusual circumstances. If she was who she claimed to be, she outranked him significantly. If she wasn't, she was an exceptional actress. "How do I verify your identity?" Marcus asked. "You don't," Walsh replied. "You're operating on need-to-know protocols, and your current clearance level doesn't include verification authority for my activities. What you need to know is that Lieutenant Chun has discovered something that threatens an ongoing operation, and hostile intelligence services have now identified both of you as targets." "What kind of operation?" "The kind that keeps foreign adversaries from gaining access to classified naval technology," Walsh said. "Lieutenant Chen's enhanced surveillance protocols are extremely effective. Too effective. She's intercepted communications that reveal the existence of a spy network operating inside multiple naval installations." Marcus absorbed this information. If Sarah had accidentally uncovered a network of foreign spies, her life would indeed be in serious danger. Spy networks protected themselves by eliminating threats, and an intelligence officer with evidence of their activities would certainly qualify as a threat. "Why wasn't I briefed on this?" Marcus asked. "My handler made no mention of counterintelligence operations." "Because your handler doesn't know," Walsh replied. "This operation is compartmentalized above his clearance level. You are positioned here as an asset in place, ready to provide security support if the situation required it. As of last night, the situation requires it." "What are my orders?" Walsh stepped out from behind the pillar, revealing a woman in her mid-40s wearing civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide her military bearing. She carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to command, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence of a career intelligence officer. "Your orders are to maintain close contact with Lieutenant Chun while appearing to maintain your civilian cover," Walsh said. "She believes you're retired military with an interest in pursuing a relationship. That cover story allows you to spend time with her without arousing suspicion." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the deception involved, but operational necessity often required personal sacrifices. "What's the threat assessment?" "Immediate and escalating," Walsh replied. "We've identified at least 3 hostile operatives in the area, possibly more. They've been ordered to eliminate Lieutenant Chun and recover any evidence she may have collected. Your job is to keep her alive while we develop the intelligence picture and neutralize the spy network." "Do we know who's running the network?" Walsh hesitated. "We have strong suspicions, but no definitive proof. What we know is that the network has been operating for at least 18 months, feeding information about naval deployments, technology developments, and personnel assignments to a foreign intelligence service. Lieutenant Chen's work threatens to expose the entire operation." Marcus considered the tactical situation. Protecting one person against multiple professional operatives was challenging under the best circumstances. Doing it while maintaining a civilian cover and without alerting the target to the danger would be significantly more difficult. "Does Lieutenant Chun know she's in danger?" "She's been told to exercise enhanced personal security measures due to a general threat assessment," Walsh said. She doesn't know the specific nature of the threat or the fact that she's specifically targeted. We need to keep it that way until we can eliminate the hostile operatives. Why not extract her to a secure location? Because she's still gathering intelligence on the spy network, Walsh explained. Her work is providing us with real-time information about their communications and activities. If she disappears suddenly, they'll know their operation has been compromised and will shut down before we can roll up the entire network. Marcus understood the logic, but he didn't like it. Using Sarah as an unwitting intelligence asset while she remained exposed to assassination attempts was the kind of operation that often ended badly for everyone involved. "What support do I have?" he asked. "Limited," Walsh admitted. "This operation is so classified that we can't risk involving local law enforcement or standard military security. You'll have access to emergency extraction if the situation becomes untenable, but otherwise, you're operating independently." Walsh handed Marcus a small device that looked like a standard smartphone, but contained secure communication equipment and tracking capabilities. This will allow you to maintain contact with operational support, GPS tracking, encrypted messaging, and emergency beacon functionality. Marcus pocketed the device. "How do I explain increased contact with Lieutenant Chun without making her suspicious?" "That's where your natural charm comes in," Walsh said with what might have been a slight smile. "She's clearly interested in pursuing a relationship with you. Use that interest to justify spending more time together. Take her to dinner, go to movies, visit places where you can maintain situational awareness while appearing to enjoy normal social activities." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He was being ordered to fake a romantic relationship to protect someone who was genuinely interested in having a romantic relationship with him. The deception felt wrong on multiple levels, but operational requirements had to take priority over personal feelings. "Time frame for this operation?" "Unknown," Walsh replied. "Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how quickly we can identify and neutralize the spy network. Your job is to keep Lieutenant Chen alive and operational until we can eliminate the threat." Marcus nodded. "Understood. Is there anything else I need to know?" "Yes," Walsh said, her expression becoming more serious. "The spy network knows about your true identity. They may attempt to use that information against you or Lieutenant Chen. Be prepared for psychological operations designed to create doubt or mistrust between you." With that warning, Commander Walsh disappeared back into the shadows of the warehouse, leaving Marcus alone to consider the complexity of his new mission. Protecting Sarah while deceiving her about the nature of their relationship was going to require skills that weren't taught in any military training program. Marcus left the warehouse and returned to his truck, already planning how to approach Sarah without arousing suspicion about his sudden interest in spending more time together. The foundation was already there. Their conversation at the bar had been genuinely enjoyable, and Sarah had clearly been interested in continuing their acquaintance. Now he just had to turn that mutual interest into a cover story that would keep both of them alive long enough to identify and eliminate the people who wanted them dead. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message as she finished reviewing the morning's intelligence reports. The message was from Marcus, asking if she'd like to have dinner that evening at a restaurant downtown. She found herself smiling as she typed back acceptance, surprised by how much she was looking forward to seeing him again. The previous night had been the most enjoyable social interaction she'd had in months. Marcus was intelligent without being condescending, confident without being arrogant, and he'd handled the situation with Staff Sergeant Williams with exactly the right combination of authority and restraint. There was clearly more to his background than he was revealing, but Sarah was accustomed to people with security clearances being circumspect about their work history. What she didn't know was that Marcus had spent 2 hours researching the restaurant he'd suggested, verifying sightlines, escape routes, and security protocols. The location offered excellent visibility of all approaches, multiple exits, and positioning that would allow him to observe potential threats while maintaining normal conversation. At 1900 hours, Marcus arrived at Romano's Italian Bistro 15 minutes early, conducting a final security sweep before Sarah's arrival. The restaurant was moderately busy, providing good cover, but not so crowded that movement would be restricted if emergency action became necessary. He requested a table near the back wall, with clear views of both the main entrance and the service entrance. Sarah arrived precisely on time, wearing a blue dress that suggested she'd made an effort to look nice for their dinner. Marcus stood as she approached the table, noting that she'd followed basic security protocols without apparently thinking about it. She'd scanned the room upon entering, positioned herself with her back to the wall, and kept her purse positioned for quick access. Someone had definitely briefed her about enhanced security measures. "This is a lovely place," Sarah said as they settled into their seats. "I've driven past it hundreds of times, but never stopped in. I thought you might enjoy it," Marcus replied, passing her a menu. The food's supposed to be excellent, and the atmosphere is relaxed enough for actual conversation. They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into the kind of easy dialogue that had characterized their previous meeting. Sarah talked about her work in general terms, mentioning projects and challenges without revealing classified information. Marcus reciprocated with stories about his military experience, carefully edited to exclude details that would reveal his true specialty. What neither of them mentioned was the heightened awareness they both maintained throughout the evening. Sarah unconsciously tracked the movement of other patrons and staff members. Marcus positioned himself to observe the parking lot through the restaurant's front windows. Both of them noticed when new customers entered, automatically assessing whether they posed potential threats. Halfway through dinner, Marcus's secure phone vibrated with an incoming message. He glanced at the display and saw a priority alert from his surveillance team. 2 vehicles had been observed conducting pattern surveillance around Sarah's apartment complex, and thermal imaging suggested the presence of multiple occupants in each vehicle. Marcus excused himself to use the restroom, stepping into the hallway where he could respond to the message without Sarah overhearing. The surveillance team reported that the unknown vehicles had departed after approximately 30 minutes, but their presence suggested that hostile operatives were actively seeking opportunities to approach Sarah. When Marcus returned to the table, he found Sarah studying her wine glass with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was thinking about something other than dinner conversation. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Sarah looked up, seeming to come back from some distant thought. "I'm sorry. Just work stuff on my mind. Sometimes it's hard to switch off, you know." Marcus understood exactly what she meant, though probably not in the way she intended. "Anything you want to talk about?" "Not really," Sarah said. "Just the usual challenges of trying to stay ahead of people who don't want to be found." The comment was innocuous enough that most people would have interpreted it as general job stress. But Marcus heard the underlying tension in Sarah's voice, and he suspected she was dealing with something more specific than routine work pressure. "The nature of intelligence work, I suppose," Marcus said carefully, "always trying to see patterns that other people are trying to hide." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. And sometimes you find patterns you weren't looking for, which creates interesting complications." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Sarah was telling him, as directly as she dared, that she'd discovered something unexpected in her work, something significant enough to cause complications. Those kinds of discoveries can be challenging, Marcus agreed, especially when you're not sure who you can trust with the information. Sarah's eyes sharpened slightly, and Marcus realized she was evaluating his response for signs that he understood more than he was saying. For a moment, the careful dance of their conversation balanced on the edge of direct acknowledgement. "Trust is always complicated in this business," Sarah said finally. "You learn to verify everything, even when it comes from people who should be reliable." Marcus nodded, understanding that Sarah was telling him she'd discovered evidence of betrayal within her own organization. The spy network wasn't just operating against the Navy, it had people inside the Navy. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their main courses, but the subtext remained clear. Sarah knew she was in danger, and she was trying to determine whether Marcus could be trusted with that knowledge. Marcus made a decision that went against his operational orders, but felt necessary for Sarah's immediate safety. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." She set down her fork and gave him her full attention. Have you noticed anything unusual recently? People you don't recognize watching you, vehicles that seem to appear too often, changes in routine security procedures at work. Sarah's expression became very still. Why would you ask me that? Because I care about your safety, Marcus said simply. And because I have experience recognizing when someone might be in danger. For several seconds, Sarah studied his face with the analytical intensity she normally reserved for intelligence assessments. Marcus could see her weighing the risks of trusting him against the risks of continuing to handle the situation alone. Yes, she said finally. I've noticed things, and I've been told to exercise enhanced personal security measures, though nobody has explained exactly why. Marcus felt relief at her honesty, even as he recognized the increased danger it represented. Sarah, I think you should know that your enhanced security protocols aren't just precautionary. There are people who want to hurt you because of something you've discovered in your work. Sarah's face went pale. How do you know that? Marcus had reached the point where continued deception would be more dangerous than partial honesty. Because I'm not exactly who I told you I was. The admission hung between them like a live grenade. Sarah's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward her purse, where Marcus assumed she carried some form of personal protection. What do you mean? She asked, her voice carefully controlled. I mean, I'm not retired military, Marcus said. I'm currently assigned to a mission that involves your protection. My presence at the bar last night wasn't coincidental. Sarah absorbed this information with the kind of professional calm that confirmed Marcus's assessment of her capabilities. How long have you been watching me? I haven't been watching you specifically, Marcus said. I was positioned here as a general asset, ready to provide support if needed. The situation became specific when your work intersected with an ongoing counterintelligence operation. What kind of counterintelligence operation? Marcus glanced around the restaurant, confirming that their conversation wasn't being overheard. The kind that involves a spy network operating inside multiple naval installations. The kind where intelligence officers who discover evidence of that network sometimes have accidents. Sarah's expression became grimly thoughtful. The communications intercepts I've been analyzing. They're not just random foreign chatter, are they? What have you found? Sarah hesitated, clearly weighing operational security against the need for information sharing. Patterns suggesting coordinated intelligence collection targeting naval technology and deployment schedules. Multiple sources, multiple collection methods, all feeding into what appears to be a centralized analysis capability. Marcus nodded. That matches what my handlers believe you've uncovered. The question is whether you've identified any of the sources. I have suspicions, Sarah said carefully, but no definitive proof. The traffic patterns suggest at least one source inside the intelligence community itself, possibly at a senior level. This confirmed Marcus's worst fears. A senior-level spy within naval intelligence would have access to virtually unlimited classified information, including details about ongoing counterintelligence operations. Such a person would be in a position to identify threats to their network and arrange for those threats to be eliminated. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Marcus said. Your life is in immediate danger. There are professional operatives in this area who have been tasked with killing you and recovering any evidence you've collected. My job is to keep you alive while a larger operation deals with the spy network. Sarah's training kicked in, and she began thinking tactically rather than emotionally. How many operatives? What kind of capabilities? How much time do we have? Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her composure. Most people would have panicked or demanded immediate extraction. Sarah was already thinking about how to handle the operational requirements. At least 3, possibly more, Marcus replied. Professional-level training and equipment. They've been conducting surveillance on your apartment and workplace. The timeline is immediate. They can make their move anytime they can isolate you. What about backup? Support assets? Extraction options? Limited, Marcus admitted. This operation is highly classified. Most support would have to come through channels that might be compromised. Sarah nodded grimly. So we're essentially on our own until the larger operation resolves. That's correct. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of everything Marcus had told her. When she spoke again, her voice carried the kind of determination that Marcus recognized from his most capable teammates. "Okay," she said. "What do we do?" Marcus felt a surge of respect for this woman who could transition from a pleasant dinner conversation to planning survival tactics without missing a beat. First, we establish secure communication protocols. Second, we modify your routine to make it harder for them to predict your movements. Third, we prepare for the possibility that they'll escalate to direct action. When do we start? We already have, Marcus said. By having this conversation in a public place with good sight lines and multiple exits, by arriving separately and maintaining the appearance of a normal social interaction, by planning our next moves before we need to make them. Sarah smiled grimly. "You're very good at this. I've had practice. What's your real name?" Sarah asked suddenly. Marcus considered the question. His operational identity was Marcus Thompson, but that wasn't his birth name or his true identity. Revealing classified information to someone without proper clearance was a serious violation of protocol. "Marcus Thompson is my operational name," he said finally. "My real identity is classified above your current clearance level." Sarah nodded, apparently unsurprised by the answer. "Fair enough. I've worked with enough special operations personnel to understand how compartmentalized identities work." Marcus's secure phone vibrated again, this time with an urgent priority message. He read the display and felt his blood turn cold. The message contained only 4 words, but they changed everything about their situation. "Network knows you're compromised." The spy network had discovered that Sarah was aware of their existence, and that Marcus was protecting her, which meant the careful game of surveillance and counter-surveillance was about to become a much more direct and deadly confrontation. Marcus looked up to find Sarah watching his expression. "Bad news?" she asked. "The worst," Marcus replied. "We need to leave. Now." Marcus dropped cash on the table without waiting for the check and stood up with fluid urgency. "We're going out the back exit. Stay close to me, move naturally, and if I tell you to run, don't ask questions." Sarah grabbed her purse and followed Marcus through the restaurant toward the service entrance. To casual observers, they looked like a couple leaving early, perhaps to continue their evening elsewhere. Marcus's hand rested lightly on Sarah's lower back, guiding her movement while appearing protective rather than tactical. They exited through the kitchen, past surprise staff members who were too busy with dinner service to pay much attention to 2 well-dressed customers walking through their workspace. Marcus had noted this exit during his initial reconnaissance, along with the alley it accessed and the street beyond. The alley behind Romano's was narrow and poorly lit, lined with dumpsters and service vehicle for the various businesses on the block. Marcus paused just outside the door, scanning for threats while Sarah waited silently beside him. The immediate area appeared clear, but Marcus's instincts were screaming warnings about unseen dangers. "My car is 3 blocks north," Sarah whispered. "Yours? 2 blocks west," Marcus replied. "But we're not going to either of them. Both locations are probably under surveillance." Marcus led Sarah through the alley, using parked vehicles and dumpsters for concealment as they moved toward the cross street. The evening foot traffic provided good camouflage, but it also offered opportunities for hostile operatives to blend in with innocent pedestrians. They had covered half a block when Marcus spotted the first watcher, a man in a dark jacket standing near a bus stop, paying more attention to the restaurant district than to arriving buses. The man's positioning and behavior marked him as professional surveillance, probably part of a larger team. "There," Marcus murmured to Sarah, indicating the watcher with a subtle head movement. "Bus stop. See him?" Sarah followed his gaze and nodded almost imperceptibly. "Professional? Definitely. Which means there are others." Marcus altered their route, leading Sarah down a side street that offered better concealment and more escape options. The area was primarily residential, with narrow streets and abundant parked cars that would make vehicle pursuit difficult. Marcus's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from Commander Walsh. He answered while continuing to move, keeping his voice low enough that only Sarah could hear. "Ghost 9. Marcus, the situation has deteriorated rapidly. Walsh's voice was tense with urgency. "We've identified the senior-level source within naval intelligence. Admiral Richardson himself is running the spy network." Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with horrible clarity. Admiral Richardson was Sarah's commanding officer, the man who had approved her enhanced surveillance protocols. He would have had access to her reports, her findings, and her schedule. He would have known exactly what she had discovered and when she posed a threat to his operation. "How certain?" Marcus asked. 90%. "We intercepted communications confirming his involvement, including orders to eliminate Lieutenant Shun before she could provide evidence to federal investigators. The termination order was issued 2 hours ago." Marcus stopped walking, pulling Sarah into the shadows between two parked cars. "Sarah," he said urgently, "Admiral Richardson is the spy network's inside source. He's ordered your assassination." Sarah's face went through a series of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and, finally, grim acceptance. That explains how they've stayed ahead of every investigation. He's been feeding them information about our counterintelligence efforts. "It explains more than that," Marcus said. "He approved your surveillance protocols because he wanted to know what you discovered. He's been monitoring your work to identify threats to his operation." Sarah's phone began ringing. The caller ID showed Admiral Richardson's direct line. "Don't answer it," Marcus said immediately. "If you answer, he'll know we're together and aware of his involvement." Sarah stared at the phone as it continued ringing. "He's my commanding officer. If I don't answer, he'll know something's wrong." "Something is wrong," Marcus replied. "Answer that call, and you'll be confirming your location to someone who wants you dead." The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Richardson was persistent, which suggested urgency on his part, probably trying to determine Sarah's location so his operatives could move against her. "We need to get off the street," Marcus said. "Too much exposure, too many sightlines. They're going to start closing the net." Marcus led Sarah through a residential neighborhood, using his knowledge of urban evasion techniques to avoid main streets and obvious surveillance positions. Their destination was a safe house he'd established during his first week of assignment, a small apartment rented under a false identity, stocked with emergency supplies and communication equipment. They had traveled 4 blocks when Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. Vehicle approaching slowly from behind. Dark sedan, 2 occupants. Marcus glanced back and confirmed the threat. The sedan was maintaining pace with their walking speed, staying far enough back to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to react if they tried to run. Classic mobile surveillance, probably coordinating with foot teams to create a containment pattern. "Next intersection, we turn left and start moving faster," Marcus said. "If they accelerate to keep us in sight, we'll know they're hostile." They turned the corner and increased their pace to a brisk walk. The sedan accelerated slightly, confirming Marcus's assessment. They were definitely being followed. "Options?" Sarah asked, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "We could try to lose them in the residential area, or we can confront them directly," Marcus replied. "If we run, they'll call in additional assets and turn this into a full pursuit. If we confront them, we control the timing and location of the engagement." Sarah considered their tactical situation with the analytical mind that had made her an effective intelligence officer. How many assets do they likely have in the area? Minimum of 6, Marcus estimated. Probably more. The sedan crew, at least 1 more mobile team, and foot surveillance assets positioned at likely escape routes. Then, running just delays the inevitable while giving them time to position additional resources, Sarah concluded. "We confront them." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for Sarah's tactical thinking. Most people would have chosen flight over fight, but Sarah understood that their best chance lay in taking initiative rather than reacting to enemy actions. "There," Marcus pointed toward a small park half a block ahead. "Open space, multiple escape routes, good visibility. If we're going to do this, that's where we want to do it." They entered the park, a modest neighborhood green space with walking paths, playground equipment, and scattered benches. At this hour, it was essentially deserted, which suited their purposes perfectly. Marcus led Sarah to a position near the center of the park where they would have clear sight lines in all directions. The dark sedan pulled to the curb across the street. Two men got out, both wearing dark clothing and moving with the controlled precision of trained operatives. They crossed the street and entered the park, making no attempt at concealment now that the game had moved to open confrontation. Marcus placed himself between Sarah and the approaching men, his stance relaxed but ready. "Stay behind me. If this goes bad, head for the eastern exit and don't look back." The lead operative was the same man Marcus had encountered in the parking lot the previous night, David Morrison, according to his false identification. His partner was younger, probably early 30s, with a lean build and alert movements of someone with military or intelligence training. "Mr. Thompson," Morrison called out as they approached. "We need to have a conversation with you and the lady." "I think we're good on conversation for tonight," Marcus replied. "Thanks anyway." Morrison stopped approximately 20 feet away, positioning himself where he could observe both Marcus and Sarah while maintaining a safe distance. His partner moved to flank them, creating a tactical disadvantage that Marcus couldn't ignore. "The thing is," Morrison continued, "our conversation isn't really optional. Admiral Richardson has some questions about Lieutenant Chin's recent work, and he's asked us to escort her to a meeting." "Admiral Richardson can schedule a meeting through proper channels," Sarah said, stepping out from behind Marcus despite his protective positioning. "I don't take orders from civilians." Morrison smiled, the expression cold and predatory. "We're not civilians, Lieutenant. We're contractors working on behalf of naval intelligence. Our authority comes directly from Admiral Richardson." "Show me your credentials," Sarah demanded. Morrison reached into his jacket, but instead of producing identification, his hand emerged with a suppressed pistol. "Our credentials are right here, Lieutenant." Marcus moved before Morrison could bring the weapon fully to bear, covering the distance between them in 3 quick strides. His training took over completely, muscle memory and combat instincts overriding conscious thought. Marcus struck Morrison's gun hand with a precise blow that sent the weapon spinning away into the darkness. Morrison responded with a professionally executed counterattack, confirming Marcus's assessment of his capabilities. The fight that followed was brief, but intense, 2 professionals with lethal training attempting to gain decisive advantage over each other. Meanwhile, Sarah was dealing with Morrison's partner, using the tactical training that all intelligence officers received but rarely had occasion to employ. She was outweighed and probably outmatched in terms of combat experience, but she had advantages in speed and tactical thinking that kept her in the fight. The engagement lasted less than 2 minutes. Morrison found himself face down on the grass with his arms zip-tied behind his back, courtesy of restraints Marcus carried as standard equipment. His partner was unconscious beside a park bench, having encountered Sarah's tactical baton at high velocity. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked Sarah as they secured the scene. "I'm fine," she replied, checking the unconscious man for additional weapons. "What do we do with them?" Marcus was already on his secure phone, contacting Commander Walsh with an update on their situation. "We've captured 2 hostiles in the park near 5th and Maple. Need immediate pickup and interrogation support. Acknowledged Ghost 9. Support team is en route. Are you and Lieutenant Chin secure?" "Temporarily," Marcus replied. "But if Richardson has more assets in the area, our position will be compromised soon." "Understood. Extraction team will be at your location in 15 minutes. Federal agents are moving to arrest Admiral Richardson now." Marcus ended the call and turned to Sarah, who was searching Morrison's equipment for intelligence value. "How are you holding up?" Sarah looked up from her search, and Marcus saw something in her expression that he hadn't expected. She wasn't traumatized or shaken by the violence they'd just experienced. Instead, she looked grimly satisfied. "I'm angry," she said simply. "Angry that someone I trusted betrayed everything we're supposed to stand for. Angry that good people are probably dead because of Richardson's greed. Angry that they thought they could intimidate me into silence." Marcus understood that anger. It was the fury of a professional who had discovered corruption within their own organization, the rage of someone who took their oath of service seriously enough to risk everything to protect it. "Richardson's finished," Marcus said. "Whatever network he was running, whatever damage he caused, it ends tonight." Sarah nodded, standing up with Morrison's encrypted phone in her hand. "Maybe, but first we're going to find out exactly how much damage he did cause. This phone probably contains evidence of every operation he compromised, every person he put at risk." Marcus smiled grimly. Sarah wasn't just a victim who had survived an assassination attempt. She was an intelligence officer who was about to systematically destroy the network that had tried to kill her. "You know," Marcus said, "when this is over and the classified parts get declassified, you're going to have one hell of a story to tell." Sarah returned his smile with interest. "When this is over, I'm going to buy you dinner at a restaurant where nobody tries to kill us." "It's a deal," Marcus replied. "But next time, I'm picking the location." In the distance, they could hear the approach of vehicles that would extract them from immediate danger and begin the process of unraveling Admiral Richardson's spy network. The immediate crisis was over, but Marcus knew that the larger battle for national security was just beginning. And he was looking forward to fighting that battle alongside Lieutenant Sarah Chun, who had proven herself to be exactly the kind of partner any special operations professional would be honored to work with. The evening that had started with a drunk Marine making crude comments had ended with the exposure of a major espionage operation and the beginning of what Marcus hoped would be a long professional and personal partnership. Staff Sergeant Williams would probably never know that his boorish behavior had set in motion the chain of events that brought down a spy network that had been operating undetected for over a year. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most important missions began in the most unlikely ways.